The universe runs on precision, except when Captain Anna Mitchell's involved. She hung suspended in the trash field of what used to be the UNSC Defiance, watching her oxygen gauge tick down to 12 minutes while the ship's emergency beacon broadcast its final wheeze into the cosmic dark. Around her, chunks of hull plating tumbled in lazy spirals, each piece representing approximately $3 billion of taxpayer money and a whole lot of engineers who were going to be very disappointed. Anna kicked off a particularly large section of bulkhead, propelling herself toward the largest intact piece she could find, a storage pod that had somehow survived the reactor breach. She pried open the manual release, her gloved fingers fumbling with the mechanical lock that every modern species had abandoned in favor of biometric seals. Thank God for budget cuts, she muttered, yanking the hatch open. Inside, illuminated by her helmet light, sat the glorious chaos of human logistics. Ration packs, spare thruster fuel cells, a box labeled miscellaneous electrical, 3 rolls of military-grade duct tape, and a damaged but potentially functional ship-to-ship radio that had been scheduled for disposal. 9 minutes of oxygen. Anna grabbed the radio, fuel cells, tape, and the electrical box before pushing herself toward a section of hull that still had some structural integrity. She maglocked herself to what had once been the port observation deck and laid out her components with the careful attention of a surgeon who'd lost her medical license. The radio was fried, naturally. The plasma torpedo that had caught them had cooked its circuits more thoroughly than her grandmother's Thanksgiving turkey. But the power core was intact, and the fuel cells used a universal connection standard. Thank you, Galactic Commerce Commission, which meant they could theoretically power anything if you didn't care about warranties or safety regulations. She cracked open the electrical box and grinned. Whoever had packed this thing had the organizational skills of a caffeinated squirrel. Perfect. 5 minutes of oxygen. Anna's hands moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd grown up fixing tractors with whatever was in the barn. She stripped wires using the sharp edge of her suit's utility tool, bypassed 3 different safety interlocks, and jury-rigged a connection between the fuel cell and the radio's power core that would have made any galactic engineer file a formal complaint with the Council of Civilized Species. The fuel cells were designed for controlled, regulated discharge. She was about to turn them into the electrical equivalent of a fire hose pointed at a teacup. 3 minutes. She wrapped the entire contraption in duct tape, not for structural support, but because the tape was aluminized and would help dissipate the heat she was about to generate. Probably. She wasn't exactly working from blueprints here. Anna pressed the activation stud, and the device screamed to life with an electrical whine that she could feel through her boots. The radio's display flickered, went dark, then blazed bright enough to hurt her eyes. She quickly keyed in the emergency frequency, already composing her mayday in her head. The device began to vibrate. That was new. 1 minute of oxygen. Mayday, mayday, she transmitted, watching the power gauge on the fuel cell spike into territory marked with warning symbols. This is Captain Anna Mitchell of the UNSC Defiance, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies, requesting immediate assistance. My oxygen is. The fuel cell started glowing. Anna looked down at her improvised communications array, which was now radiating enough heat to warm her entire suit. The duct tape was beginning to bubble. Critically low, and my emergency beacon appears to be held together with spite and poor life choices. Transmitting coordinates. Please hurry because this thing is absolutely going to explode. 30 seconds of oxygen. The radio emitted a sound like a cat being strangled, then went silent. The fuel cell's glow faded from cherry red to a more manageable, about to fail catastrophically, orange. Anna's vision started to tunnel as her oxygen counter hit 0. She kept her hand on the transmission button anyway, broadcasting dead air on the hope that someone, anyone, might triangulate her position before her frozen corpse became another piece of space debris. The darkness crept in from the edges. Then, with the abruptness of a divine intervention or really good timing, a ship materialized beside her debris field. Not a human ship. Those were boxy and utilitarian. This was a Zenthari medical frigate, all flowing curves and bioluminescent panels that pulsed with serene blue light. Anna felt a tractor beam lock onto her suit roughly 2 seconds before she would have become a statistic. She woke up in a medical bay that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought hospitals should be relaxing. Everything was soft edges and calming colors. Anna tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as 3 different muscle groups reminded her that explosive decompression was bad for the body. A Zenthari physician approached, tall, crystalline skin that refracted light into subtle rainbow patterns. four arms that moved with disturbing independence. He held a medical scanner in one hand and what looked like concern in his large, multifaceted eyes. Captain Mitchell, he said in flawless English, his voice like wind chimes. You are fortunate we received your transmission. Your ship's destruction was detected, but we could not locate survivors until your signal. How long was I out? Anna croaked. Approximately 4 hours. Your oxygen deprivation was severe but not fatal. The physician tilted his head, an eerily human gesture. Our engineering team retrieved your communication device. They are disturbed by it. It worked, didn't it? That is precisely what disturbs them. Anna managed to prop herself up on her elbows as another Zenthari entered the medical bay. This one wore the badges of a chief engineer and carried her improvised radio array on a containment tray, handling it like a live grenade. Captain Mitchell. The engineer's voice carried a note of horrified fascination. I must ask you several questions about this device. Shoot. Did you construct this yourself? Yeah, from the salvage. Needed to boost the radio signal. The engineer's crystalline skin rippled through several colors that Anna's translator couldn't quite interpret. This device should not function. The power coupling violates 6 different safety protocols. The heat dissipation is inadequate. The voltage regulation is non-existent. By all logical analysis, this should have either failed immediately or exploded, killing you in the process. Anna shrugged, immediately regretted it, and settled for a pained smile. But it didn't. It worked. Yes. The engineer set the tray down and leaned closer, his multifaceted eyes studying her face. That is what I do not understand. You deliberately constructed a device with a 73% chance of catastrophic failure and a 61% chance of user fatality. Yet you activated it anyway. My oxygen was running out. I was dead either way. But surely you could have waited for your emergency beacon to. The engineer paused. Your emergency beacon was destroyed. Yep. And this was your only option for communication. Yep. The Zenthari physician and engineer exchanged what could only be described as a look. Anna had seen that look before, usually on the faces of Galactic Council representatives trying to understand why humans did things the human way. The engineer finally spoke, his voice careful. Captain, how much training did you receive in emergency communications repair? None, really. I can fix a tractor and jumpstart a truck. Figured it was the same principle. The same. The engineer's skin flashed through a rapid sequence of colors. You equated multi-spectrum subspace communication with agricultural vehicle maintenance. Both run on electricity and stubbornness. The physician made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a medical concern. Chief Engineer Calzeth, perhaps we should let the captain rest. But Calzeth was studying the device again, his 4 hands moving in complex patterns as he examined the duct tape connections. This adhesive material, what is its designed purpose? Fixing everything, everything, everything. This is not a standardized repair compound. It's tape. You stick it on stuff. Calzeth carefully peeled back a section of the duct tape, revealing the wire connections underneath. His skin went through several shades that Anna's translator marked as academic distress. You connected a Type 7 fuel cell directly to a communications array power core using uninsulated conductors and adhesive material designed for general use. The alternative was dying quietly, seemed wasteful, but the risk was acceptable. Anna met his multifaceted eyes with the calm of someone who'd made peace with her choices. Look, I get it. Your technology is elegant. It's refined. Everything has backups and safety systems and protocols developed over thousands of years. That's great when you have time and resources. She gestured at the device on its containment tray. But humans, we've been in space for less than 2 centuries. We're still figuring things out. Our tech isn't elegant. It's whatever works right now with whatever we have on hand. Sometimes that means building things that might kill us because the alternative is definitely dying. Calzeth was quiet for a long moment, his skin cycling through colors that Anna's translator kept marking as philosophical contemplation. Finally, he said, your species has a phrase, necessary risk. Yes, close enough. We have eliminated necessary risk from our society. Safety protocols, redundancy, centuries of refinement. We have made our technology as close to perfectly safe as possible. He picked up the improvised radio with something approaching reverence. But in doing so, we have perhaps forgotten that sometimes survival requires accepting danger. We call it the doctrine of acceptable risk, Anna said. If you might die doing nothing and might die doing something, you might as well do something. The worst that happens is the same either way, but at least you tried. The physician's skin pulsed with warm amber light. I believe I understand why your species reached the stars so quickly. You do not wait for the perfect solution. You build what you can with what you have and accept the consequences. Also, we're too stubborn to admit when things are impossible. Calzeth carefully placed the device back on its tray. Captain Mitchell, would you be willing to give a lecture at the Galactic Engineering Academy? I believe our students could benefit from understanding human methodology. Will there be food? Of course. Then, sure. Fair warning, though. My teaching style involves a lot of duct tape and phrases like, "This probably won't explode." That, Calzeth said, his skin finally settling on a color Anna's translator marked as amused respect, is precisely what they need to hear. 3 weeks later, Anna stood before an auditorium full of galactic engineering students, her improvised radio array displayed on a pedestal like a museum piece. She'd spent the hour explaining her construction methodology, which mostly consisted of try things until something works and ignore the warning labels. In conclusion, she said, wrapping up her lecture, human engineering isn't about elegance. It's about solving the immediate problem with whatever you have, accepting that the solution might be dangerous, and trusting that sometimes good enough right now beats perfect later. A student in the front row, a Metharian with bioluminescent tendrils, raised a question appendage. But what about safety protocols? Anna grinned. Safety protocols are what you implement after you survive. First, you survive. Then you make it safer for the next person. As the students filed out, still debating the philosophical implications of acceptable risk, Calzeth approached with that now familiar ripple of amused colors across his crystalline skin. Your lecture was enlightening, he said. Several students have already filed proposals for research into what they're calling emergency adaptive engineering. Just don't blame me when they start duct taping things. Oh, we fully intend to blame you. His skin flashed with humor. But perhaps blame is not the correct word. Credit, maybe. Anna looked at her improvised device one last time, the scorched wiring, the bubbled duct tape, the components that had no business working together but had saved her life anyway. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't refined. It was held together with determination and a fundamental disregard for the word impossible. It was, in other words, perfectly human. As she left the auditorium, Calzeth called after her, "Captain, your people have a saying, yes, about necessity and invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. Perhaps, but I think for humans, necessity is also the father of acceptable risk." He paused. "And apparently, duct tape is the family dog who fixes everything." Anna laughed, and somewhere in the galactic archives, her improvised radio array was filed under Human Engineering Methodology, Case Study in Survivable Catastrophe. Because in the end, the difference between human technology and everyone else's wasn't sophistication. It was that humans had learned to answer the question, is it safe? With safe enough, and the question, will it work? With only one way to find out. And sometimes, that was exactly what the situation required. After all, the best solution isn't always the elegant one. Sometimes it's just the one that works before you run out of oxygen.